June 6, 1944, 6:01 hours. English Channel, 8 miles off the coast of Normandy. They said it was the most coordinated assault in history. Every wave timed, every unit drilled, every aircraft assigned a role: escort, observe, protect, not engage. Captain Ernie Harris flew a P-47 Thunderbolt, a beast of a plane, thick armor, 850 cals, and a belly full of fire. He was 25, from Missouri. His orders were clear. Maintain air superiority. Do not descend below 5,000 feet. But through his canopy, just beyond the prop blur, he saw what command hadn't: blood-stained water, shattered landing crafts, men, his men, pinned down against the sea wall, gunned down before their boots touched sand. The radio was sterile. Omaha sector, heavy resistance. Await artillery support. Harris didn't wait. He banked left, dove low. The command tower screamed, "Thunder 6, climb immediately. That's not your mission." But down there, trapped in bullet crossfire, screaming for cover, were 500 American boys. And one of them might have been from Missouri, too. They trained him to fly, trained him to follow, but they never trained him to watch his brothers die. So Ernie Harris did the one thing they didn't authorize. He broke the sky and aimed straight at the beach. The roar of the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine filled the cockpit like a war drum. Gauges flickered. The altimeter ticked down. Captain Harris pushed against his restraints as the Thunderbolt dove beneath cloud cover, slicing into the chaos below. The beach wasn't a beach anymore. It was a blender of mud, smoke, fire, and bodies. Mortar shells burst in geysers of sand. MG-42 tracers hissed like hornets across the surf. Landing craft doors dropped open, and men were chewed apart before they could scream. Some floated face down, some crawled through blood, dragging rifles behind them like forgotten toys. The radio crackled again. "Do not engage. Do not descend. Repeat." Harris shut it off. He was now below 2,000 feet, his canopy smeared with ocean mist and soot. Through the smoke, he could see them, American soldiers clinging to Czech hedgehogs, clustered behind fragments of destroyed tanks. They weren't moving forward. They weren't moving at all. To Harris, it wasn't war anymore. It was execution. He scanned the bluffs. And there, etched into the cliffs like a jagged wound, was the pillbox. Concrete fangs. Muzzle flashes dancing like evil fireflies. That was the nest doing the worst of it. He gritted his teeth. "I see you now," he muttered. Throttle forward, guns armed, altitude 1,200 feet. One man, one jet black streak against the smoke of the deadliest morning in modern history. The day before, in a tent flapping with damp maps and cold coffee, Harris had been briefed by a major who looked more like an accountant than a warrior. "Escort roll only, Captain," the man said, tapping a cigarette over the mission chart. "Do not initiate engagement. You fire only if fired upon. That clear?" Harris had nodded. Orders were orders. But down here, now, they didn't match reality. The pillbox wasn't firing at him. It didn't need to. It had already found its prey. Men crawled across beach gravel, dragging their lives behind them. Their helmets glinted like coins tossed into hell. Machine gun rounds struck water, rock, bone. The kind of sound that turns stomachs before it reaches ears. He saw one soldier, maybe 19, running for cover, then stumbling, then still. Harris had never fired in anger. Not like this. He'd trained, he'd drilled, strafed plywood tanks in the Arizona desert. But this wasn't a target range. It was a butcher's beach. His finger hovered over the trigger. Below, an American medic shielded a man with his own body, only to be ripped apart by an invisible line of bullets from the bluff. Something snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. Harris wasn't being fired upon, but he was being called by every man below. And he knew, right then, that if he climbed away and let this happen, he'd never fly clean again. He tilted the stick, dropped lower, and whispered to himself, "Let's rewrite the damn rules." At 600 feet, the world became raw. Salt stung through the canopy vents. Cordite bit the air. The P-47 rumbled like a steel beast being dragged toward judgment. Below him, the German MG-42s roared again, twin streams of death, sweeping the beach with mathematical cruelty. A line of soldiers tried to rush forward, only to collapse like dominoes on wet stone. Harris flinched, not because of fear, but because it was too precise, too cold. The pillbox spat another burst. He saw it now, half submerged in the bluff, flanked by sandbags and razor wire. Its barrel blinked, paused, blinked again. 2-second rhythm. Death, reload, death. The field of fire was perfect. Nobody was supposed to survive this. Harris understood. This wasn't war. It was engineering. He yanked the stick. The thunderbolt twisted sideways, banking toward the cliff at an angle no escort plane was meant to fly. The ground rushed toward him, fast and rising. Every instinct screamed abort. He didn't. The first burst came from his right wing, a line of .50 caliber fire that tore into the bluff, just inches above the pillbox. Dust and stone erupted, but the nest kept shooting, so he came around again. And this time, he aimed lower. Cannon fire walked across the sand, up the face of the hill, and into the heart of the machine. The gunfire stopped, just for a second. And in that second, 20 men moved forward, not because they were ordered, but because the sky had spoken. The second pass wasn't ordered. It wasn't logged. It was personal. Captain Harris banked hard, blood rushing from his head as the G-force pressed him deep into his seat. Sweat trickled behind his ear. He leveled out at just over 300 feet, below flak altitude, within reach of every German barrel on the beach. "Thunder 6, what the hell are you doing? Climb! Climb!" The voice over the radio was frantic now, but Harris ignored it. He gripped the stick tighter. "God damn it! I'm going in!" This wasn't strategy. It was instinct. The kind that overrides protocol when you see men die in rows. As he lined up the run, the P-47's nose dipped slightly, aligning perfectly with the bluff. The pillbox's side door flung open, Germans scrambling to reload or flee. Harris saw faces, real faces, but he didn't hesitate, because below them were his. He fired. Twin streams of .50 cal tore through the concrete lip, rupturing the gun mount. Then he dropped his nose a hair lower and let loose with high explosive rockets. 4 white streaks punched into the pillbox. 1, 2, 3, 4. The bunker erupted. Smoke and fire spewed from the slit like a dragon exhaling its last breath. The gun went silent, for good this time. But Harris didn't pull away. He looped around, spotted a second emplacement, narrower arc, deadlier position. He lined it up, again, because he wasn't fighting a war anymore. He was fighting for time. Time for those 500 men to stand, move, and live. The P-47 screamed over the surf, a silver blur with wings wide and death-loaded. Altitude, 200 feet. Harris flew so low he could see the water ripple beneath him, feel the shock waves of distant artillery thudding through the airframe. He kept one eye on the cliffs, the other on the cluster of American soldiers now moving, finally moving, across open beach. But danger wasn't done. The second emplacement, camouflaged, clever, flared to life just as he passed overhead. Muzzle flash from a recessed slot. He felt the sting of tracers whip past his canopy. One clipped his right aileron. The plane jolted, not crippled, but warned. He didn't flinch. Instead, he rolled left, swung wide, and brought the thunderbolt into the teeth of it. The sky narrowed. His vision tunneled. In that second, nothing existed but the target. He fired everything. Cannon fire erupted in rhythm, a mechanical drumbeat of American steel. The slope vanished under clouds of earth and splintered concrete. Sandbags burst like overripe fruit. The camo net caught fire, sagged, and exposed the gunners inside just before the rounds found them. The hillside shuddered and went still. Behind him, the sound changed. Less gunfire, more shouting, American shouting. Harris glanced back. The line was moving. Not in chaos, in momentum, in fury. Soldiers who had moments ago been pinned, broken, waiting to die, now surged up the sand like a wave returned to sea. He pulled up just slightly, wings level, smoke trailing behind. No orders, no medals. Just one man, in a machine built for war, rewriting the tide with every bullet. The bluff was burning, not with fire, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes after fury. The guns were silent. No muzzle flashes, no machine rhythm. Just wind. Smoke drifted in long veils down the hillside. Ash spiraled in lazy circles, like snow in a nightmare. Captain Harris circled once, twice, high now, engine steady. Below, the soldiers advanced. First in twos, then in lines. Their heads low, rifles tight. They climbed over the wreckage of tank traps, steel teeth twisted by explosives. Past the pillboxes, now open wounds. Through trenches abandoned in haste. They breached the German line, not because they overwhelmed it, but because something had cracked it wide. One man, one attack, one unauthorized run. A sergeant paused mid-climb and looked up, caught the glint of the thunderbolt circling overhead. He didn't wave. He just nodded. That was enough. Over the radio, chatter began again. Confused, stuttering. Beachhead secure. Partial advance. Unknown support aircraft. Requesting confirmation. But Harris didn't answer. He flew out over the channel, where the morning sun was just beginning to burn through the clouds. The water was slick and orange, like the sky was bleeding into the sea. He hadn't set out to be a hero. He'd just seen too much, and refused to be another man who did nothing. Inside the cockpit, silence returned. No cheering, no congratulations, just the hum of a battered engine, and 500 men now alive who shouldn't be. He flew straight, eyes on the horizon. One breach made, one war still raging. But for a few men on that beach, the tide had turned. 2 hours later, Harris touched down on a strip hastily cleared in Normandy grassland. Dust clouded behind his wheels. Ground crews ran up, ducking under his wings, checking for damage. He climbed down, face blackened, uniform soaked. No one said a word, until an officer approached, clipboard, stars on his collar. "Captain Harris," he said without looking up, "we need a word." Inside the tent, the air was hot and tight. Maps everywhere. Radios buzzed like insects. A colonel leaned forward. "You disobeyed a direct order." Harris said nothing. "You broke formation, engaged without clearance, damaged your aircraft, risked capture." Still nothing. "You also opened a corridor for the 116th Infantry to move forward. Reports estimate 500 lives preserved due to your actions. Harris finally spoke. I didn't count. The colonel paused, then leaned back. There's going to be an inquiry. You may face reprimand, or you may be decorated. Depends who signs the papers. Harris nodded. He wasn't thinking about medals or punishment. He was thinking about the kid who fell face down in the surf and didn't get up. About the medic who covered a man with his own body, and about the 20 who had, because of what he did, reached the cliff and climbed. Outside, a corporal passed by holding a piece of shrapnel the size of a boot heel. Someone else laughed for the first time that day. The war would roll on. More beaches, more orders. But something had shifted, even if no one would admit it. One pilot had chosen human instinct over military doctrine. And for a few precious minutes, that made all the difference. The letters didn't come all at once. They came months later, slow and folded, handwritten in ink, smudged by time or tears. Some mailed from Kansas, some from New York, some from the quiet farms of Iowa. But all bore the same weight. Dear Captain Harris, my husband came home. My boy said he was pinned down at Omaha and that some crazy pilot dropped out of the sky. They said it was suicide, but you did it anyway. He didn't reply to most. What could he say? He wasn't supposed to be remembered. His name wasn't in the after-action report. The commendation, when it came, was buried beneath bureaucratic caution. Tactical deviation justified by outcome. No medals, just paperwork. But the letters kept arriving. One had a drawing inside. Crayon. A boy, maybe 7, had sketched a plane with wide wings and fire coming from the nose. Stick figures waved from below. In the corner, thank you for saving my daddy. Harris read that one twice, then folded it, tucked it into his flight jacket, and never let it go. Because it said what the reports never could. Not about tactics, or airspace violations, or fuel calculations. But about something else, something deeper, that sometimes, in the roar of war, one man makes a choice no one approves, but everyone remembers. And sometimes, that's how a family stays whole. Not because of strategy, but because a pilot looked down, saw what was happening, and chose to fall into the fire. It took 39 years for anyone to write his name down. Not in a history book, not in a documentary. Just a single page, typed, yellowed, buried in a box marked Operational Irregularities, June 1944. Found in a Pentagon storage unit by a civilian archivist chasing a different story. It simply read, Unidentified P-47 pilot conducted unauthorized low-altitude strafing and rocket assault on German emplacements above Omaha Beach, 0600 to 0630 hours. Resulted in breach by 116th Infantry. Pilot not reprimanded. Outcome, strategically favorable. No name, no signature. Just a record of something that wasn't supposed to happen, but did. The archivist showed it to a historian, who traced the flight log, matched the mission deviation, found the letters. It took 2 years to find Harris. He was retired, gray-haired, living in silence outside Tulsa. A small farm, no decorations on the walls, just a jacket. And in the jacket, that crayon drawing, folded soft from time. When asked about it, he only said, they needed someone to do something, so I did. That was it. That was the line that made it into the record, finally, officially. A museum in Normandy now keeps a copy of that page, not under glass, but tacked to the inside wall of a restored bunker, The same kind Harris destroyed. Visitors walk through, silent. And some of them stop, read the faded paper, and whisper the same words. I didn't know. Now they do. No one tells you what to do in that moment. When you're 5,000 feet up, safe, untouched, and you see the men below, dying. No command manual covers that kind of clarity. No radio order accounts for what your eyes witness. You train to obey, to follow mission profiles, to trust the chain of command. But what if the chain is too slow? What if it's blind? And what if, just once, it's you who has to decide? He didn't have to go in. He could have turned back, reported the situation, waited for artillery. He could have done everything by the book and still made it home, unscathed. But he didn't. He broke the sky. Not for glory, not for medals, but for the men whose boots bled into sand, for the ones who'd never write home unless someone acted. And now, 500 families exist because of that decision. One small, impossible choice, made in the span of 12 seconds at 300 miles per hour. We talk about war as strategy, maps, politics, but in that moment, war was just one man, one engine, and one truth. Do something, or live forever knowing you didn't. The world remembers the generals. The headlines remember the invasions. But somewhere inside a black flight jacket, there's a crayon drawing that remembers him. And maybe now you will too. Because history isn't just what happened. It's who acted when no one else did. So ask yourself, what would you have done if you were him?